If you've ever looked into a dog's eyes and thought, he knows something I don't, you're probably right. Because in a quiet town on the edge of Oklahoma, a war hero named Jack Rains was about to learn that the only thing more loyal than his heart was the nose of his German Shepherd, Ranger. And that nose was about to sniff out betrayal before it destroyed everything Jack had left. The story doesn't start with a gunfight or a battlefield. It starts with a leash, a coffee mug, and a man who still flinches at the sound of thunder. Jack Rains was 42, retired Army Staff Sergeant, with a body that ached like an old pickup in winter. His home sat at the edge of a sleepy town called Stillwater Bend, a place with more flags than people, and where everyone knew which brand of beer you preferred. Jack's house was small, wood-sided, and smelled faintly of pine cleaner and wet dog. Ranger, his German Shepherd, was sprawled across the porch like a lion guarding a fallen kingdom. To anyone passing by, Jack was the picture of calm domestic life. But inside, the war never ended. His mind still replayed nights in Kandahar, the dust storms, the coded radio chatter, the flash of light before a silence that lasted too long. Ranger had been trained to wake him from those nightmares. Now, years later, the dog still did, with a paw on the chest, a soft whine, a look that said, "You're safe now, boss." Jack poured himself black coffee, bitter and strong enough to burn through fogged memories. He wore his old army hoodie, frayed at the cuffs, the kind soldiers never threw away because they were more armor than fabric. Ranger sat at his feet, eyes fixed on the door, tail thumping once every few seconds. Slow, deliberate, the rhythm of loyalty. "All right, partner," Jack muttered. "Let's go see what the world screwed up today." They headed into town in his battered F-150. Ranger's head out the window, tongue flapping like a flag in the wind. The townspeople waved because in Stillwater Bend you always waved, whether you meant it or not. Jack waved back at some, ignored others, especially Tommy Grant, the town mechanic, who always smiled too much for no reason. Something about Tommy's grin, slick, salesman-like, didn't sit right with Ranger. Every time Tommy approached, Ranger's fur rose just a bit, nostrils flaring like he caught the scent of rust and lies. At the diner, the air smelled of bacon, coffee, and gossip. The waitress, Mara, a widow in her 30s with too much kindness for this world, greeted Jack with that mix of warmth and pity that veterans hated. "Morning, Sergeant Rains. You and Ranger want the usual." "Yeah, just coffee for me." "Steak and eggs for him," Jack said, half joking. Ranger barked once, as if confirming the order. The other regulars chuckled. Everyone loved that dog. He'd saved 3 soldiers from a roadside bomb in Afghanistan, a legend that grew taller every time the story was told. But today, Ranger didn't relax. His gaze kept flicking to the window, ears pricked. Something outside made him uneasy. Jack noticed he always did. "What's up, boy?" he murmured, scratching behind Ranger's ear. "A squirrel gonna rob the bank again?" Ranger didn't respond, just a low growl, a warning. Outside, across the street, a black SUV idled with tinted windows, the kind you didn't see often in small towns. The driver's hand rested on the steering wheel, fingers tapping, once, twice, 3 times. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the SUV pulled away. Jack frowned. Weird. Later that morning, he stopped by the mechanic's shop. Tommy was wiping grease off his hands, too cheerfully. "Jack, my man, you get that truck of yours checked yet? I could swap those old spark plugs for you real cheap." Jack eyed him. "She runs fine." Tommy grinned wider. Sure. Just don't want my favorite vet stranded out there. World's a dangerous place." Ranger stepped between them, teeth barely showing, tail stiff. Jack tugged the leash lightly. "Easy, Ranger." Tommy laughed nervously. "Guess he don't like me much, huh?" Jack gave a half-smile. "He's a good judge of character." Tommy's smile faltered, just for a second. But Jack saw it. The eyes narrowed. The kind of micro-expression soldiers learned to read before people pulled triggers. That night, the storm rolled in. Lightning lit up the plains, rain hitting the roof like distant gunfire. Jack sat by the fireplace, a beer in one hand, Ranger's head in his lap. He thought about the SUV, about Tommy's twitchy grin, about the strange way his phone had been acting up lately. Calls cutting out, static in the line. Then, at 10:47 p.m., Ranger stood up suddenly, ears forward, body tense. A growl rumbled low in his chest. Jack froze. He followed Ranger's gaze toward the window. Nothing but rain. But the dog's instincts never lied. He turned off the TV, grabbed his flashlight, and moved quietly to the front door. Ranger was a shadow beside him, muscles coiled. Jack opened the door, slowly, the hinges creaking like a warning bell. Outside, the world was dark except for the faint glow of a streetlight. The air smelled like wet earth and something else. Gasoline. Jesus, Jack whispered. He traced the scent to his truck. The ground beneath it was slick, a trail of leaking fuel. He popped the hood, rain stinging his face. Something metallic glinted near the engine. A wire cut clean. Another loose end taped to a small, unfamiliar device. Ranger barked sharply. Jack's stomach dropped. He'd seen that device before. Not in Oklahoma. In Afghanistan. An improvised detonator. And someone had planted it under his hood. He yanked Ranger back, heart pounding. The rain drowned out everything, even his curses. He knew how close he'd come to turning that key tomorrow morning and never seeing another sunrise. "Who the hell?" he started, then stopped, because deep inside, he already knew who'd been close enough, familiar enough, to get near his truck without raising suspicion. Tommy Grant. Ranger barked again, tail straight as a flagpole, staring toward the distant mechanic shop at the edge of town. The dog's instincts were locked on target. Jack took a deep breath, adrenaline still burning in his veins. He looked down at Ranger and said softly, "Guess you were right, partner. Trouble's got a smell after all." Ranger tilted his head, eyes sharp, as thunder cracked across the plains. In that moment, the bond between man and dog felt like iron. Forged in fire, sealed in war, and now tested again in the quiet betrayal of home. They say dogs can sense earthquakes before they hit, feel the vibrations the human heart ignores. Ranger wasn't feeling the earth tremble that morning, but something inside him knew. He could smell deceit the way others smell rain. And for Jack Rains, war hero, mechanic by necessity, survivor by habit, the quiet days of small-town peace were about to fracture. Betrayal doesn't announce itself with sirens. It comes soft, like a friend's voice at your door, or a hand on your shoulder hiding a knife. Stillwater Bend had secrets, and Ranger was done pretending he didn't smell them. The morning after the storm, the sun came up bruised and pale, the kind of sunrise that made the world look like it was trying too hard to be normal. Jack hadn't slept. The detonator image kept flashing in his mind, each time sharper than the last. He sat at the kitchen table with blueprints of his truck spread out like a crime scene. Ranger lay at his feet, eyes half open but ears alert. Every sound, the hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboards, kept them both on edge. Jack's mind was running through the old instincts again. Assess, secure, retaliate. He wanted to storm over to Tommy Grant's garage and demand answers. But war had taught him patience and paranoia. You didn't confront the trap until you'd seen the full map. By mid-morning, Jack drove into town again, this time in Mara's borrowed Jeep. Ranger rode shotgun, his head swiveling at every passing car like a sentry scanning for ghosts. The diner was quieter than usual. Conversations stopped when Jack walked in, then resumed in hushed tones. Small towns had big mouths. Someone always knew something, and word about a veteran almost blowing himself up in the storm had probably already twisted into 10 versions. Mara brought him coffee before he even asked. "Rough night?" she asked softly. "You could say that." Her eyes flicked to Ranger. "He looks restless." "He's got good reason." Mara hesitated, then leaned closer. "You should know something, Jack. Tommy was in here late last night. Said he was looking for you. Seemed nervous. Left in a hurry when I said you'd gone home." Jack froze mid-sip. "Did he say why?" "No, but he kept asking weird stuff. Like if you were working on anything sensitive." Jack frowned. Sensitive. His word, not mine. She chewed her lip. I thought maybe it had to do with that veterans housing project you're helping the city plan. You didn't tell him anything, right? Jack's eyes narrowed. Not a damn thing. Ranger let out a low growl. His gaze was fixed on something outside the window again. Across the street, the same black SUV from yesterday. Parked. Engine idling. Jack's pulse quickened. You see that car? Mara nodded slowly. Yeah. Been there since I opened up. Jack stood, tossed a few bills on the counter. Mara, lock your doors tonight. Jack, what's going on? But he was already out the door, moving with the silent precision of an old soldier. Ranger followed close, low and focused. The SUV pulled away the second Jack stepped off the curb. Too fast, too clean. License plate smeared with mud. No way to trace. He felt the old adrenaline spark. Not panic, but purpose. That afternoon, Jack drove to the mechanic's shop. The garage door was half open, the metallic clank of tools echoing. Tommy was inside, hunched over an engine block, humming off-key. Hey, Jack. Tommy's voice wavered between friendly and forced. Didn't expect you so soon. Jack kept his tone calm. Had some car trouble last night. Yeah? That storm messed up a lot of stuff. Probably just some wiring fried. Jack smiled thinly. Yeah. Funny thing though. Looked more like someone cut the wire. Tommy froze for a fraction of a second. Then he laughed too loudly. Ah, come on, man. You think someone's out here trying to kill ya? What is this, a movie? Ranger stepped forward, muscles taut, nose twitching. Then that sound again. A deep, low growl that seemed to vibrate through the concrete floor. Jack watched Tommy's face pale. You got something you want to tell me? Jack asked quietly. Tommy swallowed. Look, man. I don't know what you're talking about. Cut the crap. Jack slammed his hand on the workbench. The clang made Ranger bark once, sharp and loud. Tommy jumped, hands trembling slightly. All right, easy, man. Maybe I heard something. Okay? Some guy's been sniffing around, asking questions about you. What kind of guys? Tommy licked his lips. Out-of-towners, business types. Said they were from a security company. Wanted to know if you still had military contacts. If you were working on any prototypes or tech. Jack frowned. Prototypes? Tommy nodded quickly. I told him you're just fixing cars and walking dogs, man. But they didn't look convinced. One of them, he had that soldier vibe, you know? Cold eyes. Jack felt that old instinct again, the one that whispered intel, not coincidence. Did they say who they worked for? No names. Just initials. RCI or something. Jack's blood ran cold. Ranger barked once like he understood, because Jack did recognize it. RCI Defense Systems. A private contractor he'd once done work for overseas. A group that didn't forgive easily, especially when a job went south. That night, Jack dug through his old army chest. Dog tags, faded letters, photos, and hidden beneath the false bottom, a small USB drive. He hadn't touched it in years. It held encrypted files from his last mission. Data he'd been told to destroy. He hadn't. Something inside him couldn't let go of what he'd seen. Ranger lay nearby, watching his every move. Yeah, I know, Jack muttered. Looks like our past finally caught up. He inserted the drive into his laptop. The screen flickered to life. Folders appeared, encrypted, locked, sealed like graves. But one file name stood out. Project Valkyrie. Jack's heart pounded. That name hadn't crossed his mind since Kandahar, when half his unit died in an accident that never made sense. He'd always suspected it wasn't an accident. And if RCI was here now, maybe they thought he still had something worth killing for. Ranger's head shot up suddenly, ears stiff. Then, crash. A rock shattered the front window. Jack dove for cover, instinct taking over. Ranger sprinted toward the window, barking ferociously. A dark figure was already disappearing into the woods beyond the yard. Jack grabbed his pistol from the drawer and bolted out the door. The night air was sharp, heavy with pine and rain. Ranger led the charge, nose to the ground, barking like a thunderclap. They chased the figure through the trees, branches snapping, breath steaming in the cold. Then Jack saw it. A flicker of movement, a shadow ducking behind a shed. He raised the gun. "Stop! You're trespassing on private property." No answer, just the faint click of metal. Flash. A gunshot. The bullet whizzed past Jack's ear, slamming into the tree behind him. He dropped flat, rolled, fired twice into the dark. Silence followed. Only the sound of Ranger growling and the wind slicing through leaves. When Jack finally crept forward, the attacker was gone. But a scrap of torn fabric hung on the fence. Black nylon, stitched with faded letters, RCI Tactical. Jack stood in the rain, heart hammering. He looked down at Ranger, who still growled low, tail rigid. "Well, buddy," Jack murmured. "Looks like we're back in the game." Ranger tilted his head, eyes bright even in the dark. Not fear, but readiness. Because this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about unfinished business. About betrayal that began on the battlefield and had finally come home. And if anyone thought they could sneak up on a soldier and his dog, they were about to learn that loyalty has teeth. The next morning came gray and heavy, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Jack Rains hadn't slept. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the torn fabric with the RCI tactical patch and a half-empty cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Ranger lay nearby, body tense even in stillness. Every few minutes his ears flicked toward the window, as if listening to something far away. The air inside the cabin buzzed with the same energy that hummed through a base right before a firefight. Quiet, tight, waiting. Jack picked up the patch again, thumb tracing the edge. "RCI," he muttered. "Guess ghosts really do know how to find you." He'd thought he left that part of his life buried under sand and classified reports. But ghosts had good intelligence. He opened his laptop again. The Project Valkyrie folder still glared from the screen like a wound that refused to close. Password locked. Encrypted. He could break it if he wanted. Years of field intel work had left him with a few tricks. But part of him hesitated. Every secret he'd ever opened had cost someone their life. Ranger suddenly stood, tail rigid, gaze fixed on the door. Jack's hand went automatically to the pistol holstered at his hip. "Talk to me, buddy," he whispered. The shepherd gave a single bark, short, clipped, alert. A knock followed. 3 sharp raps. Jack moved quietly to the window. Through the curtain he saw a figure. Female, early 30s, soaked from the rain, hair plastered against her face. She held up a badge under the porch light. Department of Defense. Jack frowned, cracked the door just enough. "Can I help you? Staff Sergeant Rains?" she asked. Her voice was steady, practiced. "Special Agent Dana Cole, Defense Intelligence." "May I come in?" Ranger's hackles rose instantly. "Depends," Jack said flatly. "You got a warrant or a friendly visit?" "Both, depending on how this goes." That earned a faint, humorless smile from him. He stepped aside, but his hand never left the pistol. Dana Cole walked in, scanning the room the way a professional does. First the exits, then the windows, then the dog. "You've been hard to track down." "Not hard enough," Jack replied. She pulled a small folder from her coat and placed it on the table. "RCI is compromised. We've been investigating their operations stateside. You're listed in their archives as a liability." Jack gave a bitter laugh. "Yeah. I got that memo when someone tried to turn my truck into confetti." Her eyes flicked to the laptop. "You still have the Valkyrie files, don't you?" He hesitated. "You already know the answer. Then you know why they're coming. That data proves RCI was running Black Ops experiments, human trials, illegal tech transfer. They want to erase the evidence. And you." Jack's jaw tightened. "And what's your play? Drag me back in so you can bury it yourself." Dana's gaze softened, just a little. "I'm trying to keep you alive, Sergeant. And maybe stop them for good." Ranger gave a low growl, not at her, but toward the back door. Dana noticed. "He hears something." Jack nodded. "He always does." The next second, glass shattered. The back window exploded inward in a spray of shards. Ranger lunged before the sound fully registered. Jack dove sideways as a flashbang clattered onto the floor. Then boom! Light and sound ripped through the room. Ranger barreled through the smoke, teeth bared, straight at the intruder climbing through the broken frame. Jack, half-blind, fired 2 controlled shots toward the shadow. The figure dropped with a grunt. Dana crouched, weapon drawn, shouting, "Contact left." 2 more outside. Jack rolled behind the counter, ears ringing. He could taste dust and cordite. Ranger, flank. The shepherd shot through the side hallway like a missile, vanishing into the storm outside. Moments later came a guttural snarl and a scream. Jack used the distraction to vault through the doorway, tackling the second attacker behind the shed. Mud splashed, fists flew. The man was trained, tight movements, military stance. But Jack had rage on his side, the kind that burned clean and cold. He slammed the man's wrist until the rifle dropped, then cracked the butt of his pistol across his jaw. By the time he looked up, Ranger was dragging another intruder by the pant leg, teeth locked, eyes blazing. Dana approached, panting. "You weren't kidding about the dog." Jack spat rainwater. "He's got better instincts than the Pentagon." Together they checked the bodies. No IDs, no insignias. Professional ghosts. Dana grabbed one of the rifles. "We need to move. If RCI sent a hit team, more are coming." Jack looked back at his home. The shattered windows, the flickering lights, the memories scattered across the floor. "Yeah," he muttered. "So much for peace and quiet." They drove out in Dana's black SUV. Irony not lost on either of them. Ranger sat in the back seat, muzzle flecked with rain and blood, staring out the window like he expected the night to chase them. Jack watched the rearview mirror. "You realize they'll trace this vehicle in an hour." "Already planned for that," Dana said, turning off the main road onto a dirt path. "There's an old comms outpost north of here, decommissioned but still wired. We can regroup there." Jack leaned back, exhaustion and adrenaline fighting for control. "You sure you're not leading me into another ambush?" "If I wanted you dead," Dana said evenly, "I wouldn't have knocked first." Ranger sneezed, almost like he agreed. Despite himself, Jack chuckled. "You hear that, Cole? Even he's got trust issues." "Smart dog. Smart enough to know when people lie," Jack said quietly. "He saved 3 soldiers from a bomb in Afghanistan. He barked until I looked under the wrong truck, the one loaded with explosives. We walked away. The others didn't." Dana's voice softened. "You think he still blames himself?" Jack shook his head. "Dogs don't blame. They just remember." Silence filled the car for a while, broken only by the hum of tires on wet dirt. Finally, Dana said, "RCI had a mole inside the Defense Intelligence Unit. We think he's feeding them our movements. That's how they found you." Jack turned toward her. "You saying one of your own sold me out?" "I'm saying trust no one who calls you patriot while cashing defense contracts." Ranger suddenly barked, sharp and insistent. Jack's eyes flicked to the side mirror, 2 headlights appearing over the ridge behind them, moving fast. "They found us," he said. Dana floored it. "Hold on." The SUV fishtailed through the mud as bullets cracked through the rain. Ranger barked furiously, claws scraping the seat. Jack reached into the glove box, found a spare mag, slammed it into his sidearm. "Window down," he shouted. Dana dropped the window. Jack leaned out into the storm, returning fire in short, precise bursts. The pursuing vehicle swerved but stayed close. Another flash, return fire shredded the tail light. Ranger lunged forward, bracing his paws on the console, barking at the attackers like he could scare bullets off course. "Keep us steady," Jack yelled. "Define steady." Dana snapped, jerking the wheel to avoid a fallen branch. The pursuing SUV closed in 10 yards, 5. A gun barrel emerged from the passenger side. Ranger saw it first. He leapt across Jack's lap, paw slamming into the horn just as the shooter fired. The bullet cracked through the windshield where Jack's head had been a heartbeat earlier. "Good boy," Jack shouted, half in disbelief. Dana spun the wheel hard right. The SUV skidded sideways across the slick road, mud spraying. The pursuing car tried to match the turn, but clipped a ditch and flipped, metal screaming as it rolled end over end into the trees. Jack exhaled shakily. "You call that steady driving?" Dana shot him a look. "You're welcome." Ranger barked once, triumphant. They finally reached the abandoned outpost, a squat concrete bunker half swallowed by weeds and rust. Dana killed the engine. The storm howled outside, wind rattling the chain-link fence. Jack stepped out first, scanning the perimeter. Ranger circled once, sniffing the air, then relaxed. "Clear," Jack murmured. Inside, the bunker smelled of dust and old circuits. Faded military signage still clung to the walls. Comms Alpha Station, property of U.S. Army. Dana set up her laptop on a cracked desk, connecting cables to a portable modem. "We've got maybe 15 minutes before they triangulate our location. I need to copy the Valkyrie files." Jack hesitated, then handed her the USB. "You better know what you're doing." "I do," she said, eyes flicking to Ranger. "But I'd feel better if your friend kept watch." Ranger was already stationed at the doorway, nose twitching, every muscle ready. Jack crouched beside him, running a hand down his fur. "We'll get through this, boy. Just like old times." Ranger looked up at him, tail thumping once. The look in his eyes wasn't fear. It was faith. The bunker's fluorescent lights flickered to life, buzzing like angry bees. Concrete walls, cracked with age, threw back their own echoes. The air smelled of rust and mildew, and something faintly electric. Dana typed furiously, code spilling across her screen. Lines of green text scrolled upward like a rising tide. "Decryption's at 70%, she said. "Once it hits 100, we'll know exactly what Valkyrie was." Jack stood near the doorway with Ranger, pistol drawn, scanning the shadows. "You ever think some things are better left buried?" "Maybe," Dana said without looking up. "But the people who buried them don't deserve peace." Thunder boomed overhead, shaking dust from the ceiling. Ranger's ears twitched, but he didn't move. The dog's eyes tracked the darkness like radar, calm, deliberate. Jack glanced at his watch, the second hand trembling. "Feels wrong to sit still." "Then pace quieter," Dana muttered. He almost smiled. Almost. Then Ranger stiffened. It was subtle, a shift of breath, a low rumble starting deep in his chest. Jack froze. "Cole." She looked up. "What is it?" Ranger's growl deepened, pointing toward the corridor behind the old server racks. Jack whispered, "We've got company." Dana killed the monitor light instantly. The bunker fell into blue darkness. The only sound was the slow drip of water somewhere in the corner. Footsteps. Soft, calculated, moving closer. Jack mouthed too. Ranger's head turned slightly left. "No, 3. The first shadow appeared at the end of the hall, infrared goggles glowing faint green. The silhouette of a suppressed rifle followed. Jack didn't wait. One controlled breath, then 3 quick shots. Crack, crack, crack. The first intruder dropped. The other 2 opened fire. Bullets ripped through the server racks, sparking showers of light. Dana dove under a desk, clutching the hard drive. "Ranger!" Jack barked. The shepherd exploded into motion, faster than thought. He lunged into the dark corridor, a blur of muscle and fury. The scream that followed was raw and short. Jack advanced behind him, firing through the smoke. Another figure fell. Silence. Then, a voice, low and mocking, from the far end. "Always did have a good trigger finger, Rains." Jack froze mid-step. That voice. He stepped into the dim emergency light. A tall man emerged from the gloom, rifle lowered, face half hidden under a cap. But Jack would have known that crooked grin anywhere. "Lieutenant Mason," Jack said, the name tasting like iron. Mason, his former commanding officer. The man who'd ordered the Valkyrie mission. The man Jack had left for dead in Kandahar after the explosion. Mason smirked. "Didn't think you'd remember me. Hard to forget a traitor." "Funny," Mason said, circling slowly. "RCI calls me a survivor." You stole what was theirs, Jack. I'm just here to finish the paperwork. Ranger growled, teeth bared. Mason glanced down at him. Still got the mutt, huh? Loyal to a fault, like his master. Jack raised his weapon. Step away from the drive. But Mason's eyes flicked toward Dana, who had risen behind him, gun trembling. Agent Cole, he said smoothly. Lower it. You're outmatched. Not today, she snapped. Then Ranger barked once. A sharp, urgent warning. Jack barely saw the motion before Mason's other hand came up, holding a small black detonator. Wouldn't shoot if I were you, Mason said. This place is wired to blow. Old Army demo kit. You remember how to run on a 5-second fuse. Jack's pulse thudded in his ears. You'll die too. Mason's grin widened. Who says I'm staying? He pressed the trigger. A beep echoed through the bunker, then another. Higher. Faster. Move, Jack yelled. Dana grabbed the drive. Ranger barked and dashed toward the exit, teeth snapping at Jack's sleeve to drag him. Jack followed, firing a blind burst toward Mason as they ran. The explosion hit like a freight train. The corridor erupted in white fire. Shockwave and heat slammed them forward. Jack hit the ground hard, dust filling his lungs. He rolled, coughing, ears ringing. Ranger was already back on his feet, limping but alive, sniffing, circling. Dana coughed beside them, clutching the hard drive to her chest. Jack, she shouted. We have to go. He looked back. The bunker behind them burned like a dying sun. Mason was gone. They stumbled into the storm, rain hissing against the flames. Half a mile away, under the cover of trees, they collapsed beside an abandoned jeep. Jack's hands shook as he checked Ranger for injuries. A small cut above the shoulder. Singed fur. Nothing worse. You saved us again, buddy, Jack murmured. Ranger licked the blood off his glove and nudged his palm like, don't get soft yet. Dana sat against a tree, coughing. He dragged you out, she said, voice raw. I saw it. He pulled you before the blast hit. Jack nodded. He's got a nose for timing. Ranger barked softly, as if correcting him. Jack looked closer. Ranger wasn't just sniffing. He was listening, ears twitching in rhythmic patterns. A faint chirp answered from Dana's bag. Jack frowned. That's not your laptop. Dana froze. What? Ranger lunged and pawed at the side pocket. A tiny blinking light pulsed inside. A tracker. Jack's stomach dropped. They bugged you. Dana's face went pale. But how? I swept for devices. Ranger growled again, pawing at her jacket collar. Another faint glint. A microtransmitter embedded in the fabric seam. Jack's expression hardened. Mason knew where to find us because someone, or something, led him straight in. Dana tore the tracker free, threw it into the mud, and stomped on it until the light died. Damn it! Jack looked at Ranger. You good at finding these, huh? Ranger wagged his tail once. Dana stared, wide-eyed. You trained him to detect electronics? Jack smiled faintly. Not exactly. He learned it himself. Back overseas, he'd find buried transmitters faster than our scanners. Guess he can hear frequencies we can't. Ranger's ears twitched again, as if proving the point. Okay, Dana said, steadying her breath. Then we use that. If Mason's still alive, and I'm betting he is, he'll regroup. We go dark, find him first. Jack looked toward the distant glow of the burning bunker. He won't stop till he gets that drive. And I won't stop till I find out what's on it. He met Ranger's gaze. You ready for one more war, partner? Ranger barked once. Clear, fierce, unbroken. The sound cut through the storm like a battle cry. They moved before dawn, the forest a maze of mist and ghost-gray trunks. Jack led, Dana followed, Ranger scouting ahead in near silence. Each time the world grew too quiet, Jack felt the old rhythm return. The breathing, the awareness, the pulse that synchronized man and dog like two halves of one instinct. The war had never really left him, but for the first time it didn't feel like he was fighting it alone. Because some loyalty, once forged in blood, never dies. It only waits for the next betrayal to reveal itself. And somewhere in that fog, Mason waited too. The night pressed down like wet velvet, heavy, suffocating, filled with the low hum of rain. Jack, Dana, and Ranger trudged through the forest toward the ridge line, their breaths forming white ghosts in the cold dawn. Dana's voice cracked through the static of the handheld radio she'd salvaged from the bunker. No signal. They're jamming the entire sector. Jack adjusted the strap of his duffel bag, which now carried the encrypted hard drive, their only leverage. Good, he muttered. Makes us ghosts too. Ranger trotted ahead, tail low, ears rotating like living antennae. Every few steps he paused, head cocked, then resumed, a silent guardian drawing invisible lines through the darkness. For the first time, Jack realized the dog wasn't just tracking sound or scent. He was mapping the terrain, predicting patterns, sensing vibrations like an organic radar. A natural-born soldier who'd evolved beyond training. Ranger's got something, Jack whispered, dropping to a crouch. Ranger's body went rigid. His nose pointed to the tree-line just beyond the ridge. Jack followed his gaze. A flicker of movement, faint and metallic, like a reflection off glass. Dana froze beside him. Drone. Too quiet, Jack said. Recon unit, probably thermal. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small EMP grenade, one of the few he'd scavenged from the wreck. Guess we'll test your theory. He pressed the trigger. The grenade rolled down the slope, beeped once, and detonated in a bloom of silent blue light. The reflection vanished instantly. A second later, the faint sound of something falling, mechanical wings snapping in the brush. Dana blinked. You carry EMPs in your pocket like tic-tacs? Jack shrugged. Old habits. Ranger patted down the hill, nudged the disabled drone with his paw, then looked back up as if to say, you missed a spot. Jack chuckled despite himself. You want to lead, you can start giving orders, too. Dana grinned. Don't tempt him. The levity was short-lived. A distant helicopter sound cut through the quiet, low, pulsing, searching. Jack's eyes narrowed. We need cover. Now. They ducked into a ravine thick with ferns and roots. Ranger wedged himself between them, ears twitching at every vibration. The chopper swept past above, its spotlight grazing the forest canopy like a giant eye. When it was gone, silence returned, but a heavy, aware silence. Dana exhaled. They're not searching randomly. Mason must have triangulated our position before the bunker blew. Jack clenched his jaw. Then we move faster. There's an old safe house 2 miles north. My unit used it for recon storage. Should still have gear. Ranger barked softly, as if confirming the route. They moved through the forest's skeletal branches until daylight broke, gray and weak. By noon, they reached the safe house. A decaying log cabin sunk half into the hillside, its windows shattered, vines crawling over its roof like old scars. Jack forced the door open. Dust exploded into the air. Inside, the remains of a field station, overturned crates, rusted ammo boxes, and a faded U.S. flag draped over a broken cot. Welcome home, Dana murmured. Jack walked to a metal locker, forced it open, and grinned faintly. Inside, rations, medical kits, 2 rifles, and a roll of encrypted comm maps. Not bad for a ghost station. Ranger jumped onto the cot, sniffed the corner, then pawed at the floor. Jack frowned. What V you got, boy? Ranger growled low, then began scratching. Steady, rhythmic. Jack knelt and pried up a loose floorboard. Beneath it, wrapped in plastic, was a sealed envelope marked with a faded stamp. Classified, Project Valkyrie. Dana's eyes widened. Are you kidding me? Jack opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph, blurred but unmistakable. Mason, years younger, standing beside 2 men in lab coats and a dog that looked almost exactly like Ranger. Same breed, same markings, same eyes. What the hell? Jack whispered. Dana leaned closer. That's him, isn't it? Yeah, Jack said softly. But this photo's from before Afghanistan. Before Ranger was even deployed. They both turned to look at Ranger, who sat quietly watching them, head tilted, like he understood. Dana's voice dropped to a whisper. You think he's part of it? Project Valkyrie? Jack ran a hand through his hair. If he is, then whatever they did, it worked. Ranger blinked slowly, then nudged the photograph with his nose, right over Mason's face. Dana gave a low laugh. Guess he's not a fan. Jack stared at the image. Mason's been running something bigger than we thought. Valkyrie wasn't just about soldiers. It was about creating them. A sharp tone broke the air. The radio on Dana's belt sputtered to life, even though she hadn't turned it on. A voice came through, distorted but clear enough to freeze them both. Rains, you shouldn't have opened that. Mason. Jack grabbed the transmitter. Where are you? Mason chuckled. Close enough. You've got something of mine, and I've got something of yours. Jack's stomach turned to ice. You're bluffing. Am I? Check the camera feed. The laptop flickered. Static. Then an image appeared. A live video feed showing a woman tied to a chair in a dim warehouse. Dana's face drained of color. Oh my God. That's Lydia, the therapist from your support group. Jack's knuckles whitened around the radio. Lydia, the one person who'd helped him through his worst nights. The only one who ever said Ranger wasn't just a dog. Mason's voice coiled through the static. You want her back, Rains? Bring me the drive. And the shepherd. The transmission cut out. Silence. Ranger whined softly, pressing against Jack's leg. Dana swallowed hard. He's going to kill her. Jack's jaw set like stone. Not if I kill him first. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Rain dripped from the trees in slow, deliberate taps, like the ticking of a bomb. Jack crouched over the flickering laptop screen one last time, memorizing every frame of Lydia's terrified face. Dana hovered near the window, scanning the horizon through a pair of cracked binoculars. Signal trace puts Mason's broadcast from 20 clicks east, she said. An old freight yard near the river. Jack nodded, eyes cold. He always did like symmetry. Brings me back to where it started. Ranger sat at attention beside him, tail still, eyes locked on the laptop as if absorbing every detail. Dana packed the hard drive into her vest. We don't have backup, Jack. Just us. And your dog. Jack checked his rifle, then looked down at Ranger. That's all we need. They reached the freight yard just before midnight. Rusted trains sat on broken tracks like tombstones, their sides scrawled with graffiti and moss. Sodium lights flickered overhead, turning puddles into trembling mirrors. The air smelled of oil and old rain. Somewhere far off, metal groaned. A gate swinging loose. Jack raised 2 fingers, signaling for silence. Ranger moved forward, low to the ground, blending into the shadows. Dana followed, breath controlled but trembling. Inside the central warehouse, lights burned behind the high windows. Voices echoed faintly, soldiers. Maybe half a dozen. Maybe more. Jack whispered, He's expecting us. Dana's grip tightened on her pistol. Good. Let's ruin his night. They split. Dana circled toward the loading docks. Jack and Ranger took the main aisle. Crates stacked like barricades formed a labyrinth of metal and shadow. The hum of generators filled the space. Jack's boots made no sound on the damp floor. Ranger advanced ahead, head low, sniffing. Then he stopped, growled once softly. Jack followed his gaze upward. Tiny red dots blinked along the rafters' motion sensors. Dozens. Mason's got the place wired, Jack whispered. Infrared tripwires, microdetectors. But Ranger was already moving. He stepped delicately forward, sniffing each pulse of light, calculating the pattern. Then he looked back at Jack and wagged his tail once. Follow me. Jack blinked. You're kidding. Ranger stepped again, slow, precise, between the red lines through the invisible maze. Jack exhaled and matched his rhythm, following the dog's every pause and pivot. It was insane. It was perfect. When they reached the inner floor, Jack realized his heartbeat had synced with Ranger's breathing. Steady, focused, alive. Ahead, a single crate stood under a hanging light, and sitting on that crate, Calm as a viper was Mason. "Welcome home, Sergeant." His voice echoed through the warehouse. "You brought my dog, I hope?" Ranger growled low, stepping forward. Jack's gun was steady. "You touch Lydia, I swear." "Oh, relax," Mason said, gesturing lazily. "She's right here." Two guards stepped out from the side, dragging Lydia into the light. Her face was bruised, but her eyes steady. When she saw Jack, a faint smile flickered across her lips. "Jack," she whispered. Mason clapped his hands slowly. "Reunion complete. Now, how about we talk business?" Jack took one step closer. "You've got 30 seconds to explain what Valkyrie was. After that, I stop asking." Mason chuckled. "You always were impatient." "Fine." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small flash drive. Project Valkyrie was never about soldiers, not human ones. It was about the perfect partner. A being that could sense danger, emotion, electromagnetic shifts, the evolution of combat intuition. You called him Ranger. We called him Prototype V1. Dana appeared on the upper walkway, gun raised. "You used dogs as lab experiments?" "Oh, don't sound so shocked," Mason sneered. "We gave them purpose. Rains here was the only one who bonded with his unit properly. His shepherd recognized him as Alpha, and the connection stuck. That mutt doesn't just follow orders. He feels them. He's biosynced." Jack felt his blood go cold. "You're saying that when you think he reacts," Mason said, grinning. "When your adrenaline spikes, his instincts sharpen. You didn't train him, Jack. You completed him." Jack glanced at Ranger. The dog met his gaze, calm, intelligent, knowing. "You're lying," Dana said. "Am I?" Mason held up a remote. "Then watch what happens when I cut the tether." He pressed a button. A high-pitched whine filled the air. Ranger yelped, staggered, ears back, eyes wide. Jack shouted, "Ranger!" and rushed forward. Mason's men opened fire. Bullets ricocheted off metal, sparks exploding like fireworks. Jack dove behind a crate, pulling Ranger down beside him. Dana fired from above, taking out one guard, then another. Lydia dropped to the floor, crawling toward cover. "Jack!" Dana yelled. "He's trying to fry Ranger's neural link." Jack ripped the remote from Mason's hand, slamming it into the ground. Mason swung a rifle at him. Jack caught it mid-swing and smashed it back into his chest. They fought, fists, elbows, fury. Years of betrayal condensed into seconds. Mason was fast, brutal, but Jack was faster. When Mason drew a knife, Jack disarmed him, twisting his wrist until bone cracked. Then Ranger was up again, growling, teeth bared, eyes glowing faintly gold in the light. Something primal and powerful radiated from him. More than rage, more than instinct. It was will. He lunged. Mason barely had time to turn before Ranger hit him, jaws locking onto his forearm. Mason screamed, fell backward into a crate, sending documents flying like white confetti. Jack pulled Ranger back just as the man slumped, groaning. "You're done," Jack said. "This ends here." Mason laughed weakly, blood dripping down his arm. "You think killing me changes anything? Valkyrie's in motion. The others, they're already out there." "Then we'll find them," Jack said. Ranger barked once, sharp, defiant. Dana dropped from the catwalk, landing beside Jack. "We've got to go. The generators are overheating." Lydia staggered toward them, clutching her side. "I set the timers," she gasped. 5 minutes. That should bury the lab for good." Jack grabbed her arm. "Let's move." They sprinted through the maze of crates as alarms blared. Flames licked up the walls. Ranger ran ahead, barking directions. Left, right, through the shattered door. Outside, the night exploded in fire. The warehouse imploded, metal screaming, windows bursting in a tidal wave of light and dust. They dove behind an overturned freight car as debris rained down. Silence followed. Only the rain remained. Jack turned to Ranger, who stood tall amid the smoke, chest rising, eyes reflecting the burning wreck. "You good, partner?" Jack asked softly. Ranger wagged his tail once, steady, proud. Dana collapsed beside them, half laughing, half crying. Remind me never to doubt your dog again. Jack looked at the fire one last time. That wasn't just my dog, he said quietly. That was my brother. Lydia smiled weakly. Then maybe humanity still has hope. As dawn broke, the four of them sat by the riverbank, the glow of the ruined freight yard fading behind them. Jack held the hard drive, now cracked, unreadable. He tossed it into the river. Dana frowned. You sure? Some things don't deserve to survive, Jack said. Ranger lay beside him, head on his knee. The morning light painted them both in soft gold. For the first time in years, Jack felt peace. He looked at Dana. What now? She smiled faintly. Now we rebuild. But first, breakfast. Ranger perked up, tail thumping. Jack laughed. Guess he agrees. They stood, walking toward the rising sun, 3 souls and 1 loyal heart that had saved them all. The river ran quietly through the valley, a silver scar slicing through the pine forest. Morning fog rolled over the water, soft and weightless. For the first time in weeks, there was no gunfire, no alarms, no smell of burning metal. Just rain, earth, and the gentle rhythm of breathing. Jack sat on a rock by the bank, elbows on his knees, staring at the ripples. His reflection looked like a ghost, older, heavier. His beard had grown in uneven patches, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Ranger sat beside him, head resting on his boot, watching the same reflection. You ever wonder if we'll stop fighting someday? Jack murmured. Ranger tilted his head, not quite understanding the words, but catching the tone. He gave a small whine, then nudged Jack's hand. Jack smiled faintly. Yeah, me neither. Behind them, Dana and Lydia worked near a campfire. Dana had scavenged dry wood and an old metal pot. Lydia boiled instant noodles, her hands trembling slightly but determined. The smell was heavenly, simple, human. Dana looked up. Breakfast is served, soldier. Jack stood, stretching. His back popped like gravel. That's the best intel I've heard all week. He joined them by the fire, sitting cross-legged. Ranger followed, tail sweeping the dirt like a metronome. Lydia handed him a steaming tin bowl. You look like hell. Feels accurate, Jack said, slurping noodles. Dana grinned. You did blow up half a warehouse last night. Technically, Lydia blew it up. Lydia raised a brow. You're welcome. They all laughed. A sound that felt foreign but good. For a few blessed minutes, there was peace. The fire crackled. Rain hissed on the tarp overhead, and Ranger's steady breathing filled the gaps between conversation. Then Dana's tone shifted, quiet but deliberate. So what now, Jack? He didn't answer right away. He watched the smoke twist upward, vanishing into the fog. I don't know, he said finally. We can't go back. Mason's network might be gone, but whoever funded Valkyrie, they'll clean house. And Ranger, he glanced at the shepherd. He's proof it worked. Lydia stirred her coffee. Proof or miracle? Both, Dana said. If they find out he's still alive, they'll come for him. Ranger looked up, as if he understood his name in the mix. His ears flicked once, and his eyes softened. Jack reached over, scratched behind his neck. Not gonna happen. He's done his time. We both have. Dana leaned forward. You could testify. Go public. Expose everything. Jack shook his head. And end up in a cell before the story hits the news? No. Let the ashes stay ashes. Lydia studied him carefully. You can't run forever, Jack. Sooner or later, ghosts catch up. He met her eyes. Yeah, but this time, I'm not running from something. He glanced down at Ranger. I'm running with something worth protecting. Ranger gave a soft woof. Agreement. Later that day, they hiked to a nearby town. Small, rural, mostly forgotten by the modern world. Faded signs, rusted trucks, and a single gas station where a dog slept by the door. Jack found an old public payphone on the corner, its paint peeling. He dropped in a coin, dialed a number from memory. Veterans Affairs Hotline, a voice said. He hesitated, This is Sergeant Jack Rains. I need to report a closure. Closure? Yeah. For a fallen comrade. There was a pause. Name of the comrade? Jack looked at Ranger, who was watching a butterfly drift across the lot. Lieutenant Mason. He's gone. The operator typed something. I'll mark it in the record, Sergeant. Do you require follow-up counseling? He smiled faintly. Already got the best therapist in town. Ranger barked softly, as if on cue. Jack hung up. That evening, they found shelter in an old farmhouse overlooking the hills. Dusty furniture, broken windows, but solid walls and a roof that mostly held. Dana patched up a solar battery to power a single bulb. Light filled the room, dim, warm. Jack sat by the window, watching the sunset smear orange across the horizon. Lydia wrote in her notebook, recording everything she remembered about Valkyrie before the memories faded. Ranger slept by the door, one paw over his nose, tail twitching occasionally as if chasing something in his dreams. Dana joined Jack by the window. He's something else, huh? Jack nodded. Yeah. He saved my life more times than I can count. She smiled. You ever think maybe it's the other way around? He turned to her. How do you mean? You saved his life, she said softly. He was built to obey, to die for someone else's mission. But you gave him something bigger, a reason. Freedom. A home. Jack didn't answer. His throat tightened. Outside, the wind shifted. A coyote howled in the distance. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Dana placed a hand on his shoulder. You can't erase what happened, but you can choose what it means. Jack nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe it means we keep moving forward. Together. Ranger stirred at the sound of his voice, blinked, and patted over, resting his head on Jack's knee. Jack smiled, eyes glistening. Yeah, buddy. Together. That night, Jack dreamed, not of war, but of open fields. Ranger running beside him, wind in his hair, sun on his face. No weapons, no missions, just motion and peace. When he woke, dawn was breaking. Lydia was asleep at the table. Dana snored quietly in the next room. Ranger lay by the window watching the sunrise. Jack sat beside him, resting a hand on his back. You know, I used to think loyalty was a chain, he said softly. Something that kept me tied to the past. But maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's what pulls us out of the dark. Ranger turned, pressed his nose against Jack's hand. And for the first time in a long, long time, Jack smiled without pain. The next morning arrived quietly, carried by the soft hum of wind through the broken shutters. The farmhouse felt alive again, faintly, like a heartbeat rediscovered after too many winters of silence. Jack stepped outside, the cold biting gently at his skin. The hills were washed in gold, dew clinging to every blade of grass. He inhaled deeply, and for once, the air didn't smell like smoke or metal. Ranger trotted beside him, tail high, chest proud. They walked to the ridge overlooking the valley, the same valley where, weeks ago, fire and betrayal had nearly swallowed them whole. Now it was just a field of quiet. Jack knelt, placed a small military dog tag into the soil. The tag was old, dented, scarred. The last piece of the man who'd once betrayed him. Mason J. Thomas. Guess this is where the trail ends, Mason, Jack whispered. You made your choices. So did I. Ranger sniffed the tag once, then sat beside Jack, ears tilted forward. Jack smiled faintly. He wasn't all bad, you know, just lost. We all were. The wind picked up, scattering dust and ash into the air. The tag glimmered once in the morning light before disappearing beneath the dirt. Let's go home, partner, Jack said. Ranger barked softly, as if in salute. Weeks passed. They found a cabin on the edge of a sleepy Oregon town. The kind of place where people still waved to strangers and the loudest sound at night was the creek tumbling over stones. Jack fixed up the roof, rebuilt the fence, and let Ranger patrol the yard like it was sacred ground. Dana settled nearby, working as a local mechanic, while Lydia stayed a few weeks longer to finish her report before heading back east. One evening, she stopped by the cabin. Ranger greeted her first, tail thumping like a drum. You two look like you've been here forever, she said, smiling. Feels that way, Jack said. Peace suits us. She looked around. You know, the world deserves to hear this story. Jack shook his head. The world doesn't need another story about war. It needs stories about what comes after. Lydia nodded. Then maybe that's the story I'll tell. She crouched, rubbing Ranger's ears. Take care of him, hero. Ranger leaned into her touch, tail wagging gently. Always do, Jack said. As Lydia drove away, the last orange light of sunset caught her windshield, flaring like a promise carried down the road. That night, Jack sat on the porch with a beer in one hand and silence in the other. The stars hung heavy above, quiet witnesses to the small, sacred miracle below. Ranger lay beside him, head on his paws. His ears flicked every now and then at the sound of crickets. Jack spoke softly. You know, buddy, I used to think saving someone meant pulling them out of danger. But maybe, sometimes saving someone just means staying beside them long enough for them to heal. Ranger raised his head, eyes glinting in the starlight, and gave a low, affectionate bark. Jack smiled. Yeah, you saved me too. He leaned back, letting the chair creak, watching the Milky Way carve its pale river across the dark. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a soldier or a survivor. He just felt alive. Months later, a viral video surfaced online. A veteran and his dog pulling a child from a flash flood near that same Oregon town. The footage, shaky and raw, showed the shepherd dragging the boy to shore while the man fought against the current. It hit 10 million views in a week. The caption read, "Some heroes wear medals, others wear fur." Jack never claimed credit. He never commented. But every once in a while, a mysterious box of dog treats showed up at the local shelter. No return address, just a note. From one survivor to another. Keep the faith. You know, life has a funny way of testing what we're made of. Sometimes the people we trust fall apart. Sometimes the world bites harder than we expect. But the truth is, real strength doesn't come from medals or missions. It comes from getting back up, no matter how many times you've been broken. Ranger taught me that loyalty isn't about following orders. It's about standing beside someone when everyone else walks away. If the story hit home for you, take a second. Hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that heroes still exist, even if they've got 4 legs and a tail. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that celebrate courage, hope, and the quiet warriors among us. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep your heart steady, your eyes open, and your soul loyal.